want to talk about my version of the life story. It's not a song. It's not a work of art, really. It's a tool. And it's a tool that we use, I use, doctors use, patients use every day. And I think it's an important tool. And I saw that story that I tell. I'd never seen it before. I went to medical school. So let me just tell you how I got there. So before I went to medical school, I was a television producer. I produced medical stories, and they were the usual medical stories, you know, where somebody is desperately ill and there's a new therapy and voila, the patient gets the therapy and instantly is better. Or this new technology which dramatically improves our ability to detect diseases. And those were the stories I told for the years that I covered medicine. Eventually, I realized that television, while exciting, is not terribly interesting. To make, to watch, television news, other kinds of television more so. So I decided to go and do something that I knew was interesting all the time. I decided to go to medical school. And so I got to medical school. There's a lot of sitting in classrooms for 2 years. But then, after 2 years, they let you loose in the hospital. You actually see patients. And that was very exciting for me. But you know what was really exciting? Was to hear the stories that doctors tell that I had never heard before. I've been covering medicine for years, and I had never heard this story. And this was the story, the tiny detective story, that lies at the heart of every doctor-patient encounter. The question that the patient has, what is wrong with me? The answer that the doctor has, which, if you were honest, would be, I'm not so sure. And it was that story and that uncertainty that appealed to me. And I realized that this was a story I'd never heard before. And I was very lucky to be able to get the chance to tell this story, to share this story with other people who I assume had never heard it, except for doctors who knew it and didn't really talk about it outside of the halls of medicine. I think doctors, too, were a little unsure as to how patients would feel if they knew about this uncertainty that lies at the heart of everything, that it was actually a detective story. I'm sure that doctors hoped that patients would think, as I thought before I got to medical school, that diagnosis was a science. I mean, we make our medical students learn sciences, and in science, you know, if you do the problem correctly, you get an answer, then you check in the back of the book, and you know whether you got it right or not. Medicine isn't at all like that. Not at all. That story, that little detective story, is actually the patient's story. The patient comes with their story, and they tell it to the doctor. And then the doctor takes that story and transforms it in this very conventional way that we all learn. It's very rigid, very structured, turns it into a medical story and uses that organization to help him or her, in my case, figure out what's going on. And then it's that doctor's job, once he has the diagnosis, to give that story back to the patient in language and ideas that they can understand and integrate into the much bigger, more complicated story that's their life. And in a very real way, doctors have the easiest job. We just have to figure things out. It's patients who have to live with it. And so, what version of the story do I give in my column? I give the doctor's story, the diagnosis story, not as he gives it to the patient, but sort of on the way there. I give it in the ideas and language that I think that people can understand without medical training. And I do it as a way of exposing and exploring this uncertainty, which is the ocean we swim in, which is why patients come to the doctor in the first place, which is why they give us their story to begin with. Thank you.